right, welcome back into Cleveland Browns Daily on a fine Wednesday edition of the program. Seth Walder joining us now as we head out on the hotline. ESPN Sports Analytics Writer, great friend of the program. He joins us. All right, Seth, you guys did 20,000 simulations for the 2020 NFL season. For our listeners out there, how do you set the criteria? How do you go about it? How do you come to the conclusion that you come to? What's the algorithm, so to speak?
Yeah, so the way it works for our NFL FPI in the preseason is that it's actually not that crazy. The biggest input here is Vegas win totals. Now, we include some other stuff as well, like how teams performed on offense, defense, and special teams last year, who the starting and backup quarterbacks are. There's a couple other just small factors, but by and large, it's those things. The key thing to know is that if you take a team's win total, that doesn't exactly tell you how good that team is, because you got to think about all the teams that they have to play as well. And so that's where the model really does a good job of teasing out how good each team is. And so once we have that, right, once we have a rating system for each team, we then simulate the season 20,000 times, and that informs our projections, not just for the regular season, but for the postseason as well.
Seth, and how do we arrive on the number 20,000? Why not 50,000? Or have we found that once we get to 20,001, we're now statistically insignificant in our changes over that? How did we arrive on the number of 20,000 simulations? Because it's a grand number.
We could do way fewer, and it would be perfectly fine. Like, the number wouldn't change that much. The reason why we do 20,000 is that what we can do is we can sort of like lock in results. So like, let's say the Browns, right? Like, if we want to be like, well, what happens if the Browns start 4-0? Well, now we can only look at sims where the Browns start 4-0 when there's 856 of them. And then we can say, okay, when the Browns start 4-0, there's an 81% chance that they make the playoffs. And so the more sims you have, the more you can filter down. Because, like, if I start saying, like, what happens when the Browns go 10-0, it's going to say, well, now there's not that very many sims. You can't do it. And so now you're going to say, like, well, why don't you do 1 million sims? Because it takes a really long time. So that's why we wouldn't do that.
Before we get into some of the specifics on what you saw with our team, the Browns, what was it? Were there any surprises for you in terms of what it spit out after all these simulations?
Yeah, for sure. I think, to me, Dallas is a team that I am quite high on, but I wasn't expecting that the model would come out and say Dallas is the fifth best team and has the fifth highest chance to reach the Super Bowl. So that was pretty surprising to me. I think it makes a lot of sense when I think about it. It likes Dallas for all the same reasons I do. Their offense was very good last year, and offense is quite predictive from year to year. But still, that was pretty surprising to me. I think New England being at 9, I was surprised about as well. It's another team that I thought would be lower, just given I feel like the talk around New England is much more negative than the 9th best team in football, though I guess that is worse than what we're expecting for them. Those are the things that stand out to me. The Detroit at 28 feels pretty low. I was kind of surprised about that, just given that Matthew Stafford played really well last year and got hurt, and that really changed their season. So, to me, those are some of the things that surprised me. One more, Houston, 24. I thought that stood out. I was not expecting them to be that low.
Yeah, and I was going to jump right into this New England one, that if you told me that Tom Brady and the Bucs would be projected 1/2 of a game better than the New England Patriots without Tom Brady, that would be tough for me to believe here. And how do you factor in, for example, a thing like Jarrett Stidham? I mean, how do we even know what to make of Jarrett Stidham with the New England Patriots in these simulations?
Yeah, it is hard, because if you have someone that you haven't really seen, what do you do with them? So actually, one of the ways that we handle this is generally rookie quarterbacks, it sort of thinks of as being not particularly good, and it has a wide band of uncertainty around them. So this doesn't matter as much in the preseason, but like, let's say Jarrett Stidham starts to play pretty well after 3 games. Well, the model would start to move on him and say, oh, wait, there might be something here. And it would do that more for Jarrett Stidham than if, like, an older quarterback who, hasn't been as good if Nick Foles started playing, like, out of his mind, then it would be like, wait a second, we know Nick Foles. We have more certainty about him. And so I think that's one way. It really doesn't know, I guess, to some degree, but it's basing it on not a very good quarterback. I think the thing with New England is their defense was outrageous last year, and so it's sort of working under the assumption that they're going to have a good defense, though not as good as last year.
Seth, for the Browns, Seth Walder, our guest on the hotline, ESPN Sports Analytics Writer. For us, you have us at 8.2, chance to reach the playoffs, 46%. You do have us in the playoffs with the 7 spot, so that gets in. Also Pittsburgh and Baltimore as well, which speaks to one thing that we feel pretty confident about. If it's not the toughest division, it might be the second toughest division in football behind the NFC West. The strength in this division, you had Baltimore with the second number of highest amount of the spit out the second highest number of wins for Baltimore. This division is something else to try to get through it.
I think so, but I think the NFC West is the best division. And
right.
One way we can see that is in the new format, you can get all 4 teams in a division into the playoffs. It's hard to do, but it is possible. And that happened about 2% of the time for us. And the NFC West was by far the division that did that the most. So I do think it's the best division. But there's upside there because we don't know as much about Cincinnati right now with Joe Burrow.
And that's a team that I think could surprise some people. You know, you've got Joe Burrow. Obviously, you think of him pretty highly, number 1 overall pick, consensus. A.J. Green's back. They've got Boyd. They get C.D. Lamb. They remake their secondary. Yeah, this division is going to be an absolute bear, I think, for anybody to come out of it. And as you guys project here, 3 potential playoff teams, which would be a stunning, I think, accomplishment for the AFC North.
No doubt about it. I think it's absolutely it's a seriously strong division. The good news for the Browns is that outside of the division, they have a reasonably weak schedule, and so I think that's one reason that you might feel a little more optimistic about the Browns just this season and how many wins they might get, because they do get some soft games. Jets, Giants, Jaguars. You know, we're just looking at that list. Those are some appetizing. Redskins is on that slate. So that there's reason for optimism from Cleveland there.
Seth, one thing that as I looked through this list that jumped out to me, 2 teams. You have them 15 and 16 here. The Green Bay Packers, who went 13-3 last year, 8.1 wins, not expected to make the playoffs, 43% chance of making it. And then on the other side, number 16, the Titans, a team that a lot of people are putting, on the heels of their AFC Championship run, putting them in the top 10s. What is it about the Packers that saw such a massive, and I would say a 5-win decline is massive? I realize they wasted a first-round pick on somebody who can't help Aaron Rodgers, who's pretty good at quarterback, but that seems like a pretty precipitous drop there.
Yeah, so absolutely. The Packers and Titans stand out to people. I think there's a couple things. Number one with the Packers, this is a team that, according to our metrics last year, was a good team, but got fortunate bounces along the way. I think Aaron Rodgers has not played well, honestly, for several seasons. And last season was not a particularly good quarterback in terms of the numbers. So it looks at the Green Bay Packers and says, I'm not sure there's a reason why they ought to be considered that good of a team other than the wins and losses last year, which it thinks is misleading. With Tennessee, I think that you have – look, they did incredible. Ryan Tannehill played out of his mind last year, and that absolutely – that was real, right? Like that was real. But I think there's some of the same effects there in terms of fortunate to make it as far as they did in the postseason, to have a run first attack. You don't like to see that. The model is not going to be as high on Ryan Tannehill because he has a long history of not being a very good quarterback before he was a great quarterback last year. So it's looking at his entire career history. I think those are some reasons to be skeptical of both Green Bay and Tennessee. I think it's possible. I feel similarly to the way the model is in that they certainly could get back in the postseason, but I think there's a very realistic possibility that both could fall short of meeting what they did last year.
We've talked a lot about the teams at the top and some of the divisions. What about at the bottom? And the reason this is interesting is because this will be known as the Trevor Lawrence draft, and it may, by the time it's all said and done, be known as the Trevor Lawrence Justin Fields draft, as they both, I think, the pretty good chance to go 1-2. The race for the bottom, so to speak. What do you see there?
Jacksonville is by far the favorite to land that number 1 pick. It's almost a 1-4 shot. for them to do it. I think it's a really, frankly, like in comparison to the rest of the football, the NFL, Jacksonville is not a very good team. I honestly was pretty dumbfounded by what they did in the first round of the draft, where you have a team that, as far as I would say, does not have a starting quarterback, could have traded up for Tua. To me, that's what I probably would have done. I understand that maybe they feel like they want to give Minshew a shot, and then you have Fields and Lawrence, like you mentioned, next year. But then they turned down an absolute coup of a trade opportunity in that first round with Tampa Bay, and that was a mistake. Sorry, that's an aside, but I'm still just blown away by Jacksonville's inability to do that. I think they're just missing a lot of pieces, and you have a complete you have someone that has not proven to be successful in Gardner Minshew, a quarterback, and so they are the most likely team to land that top pick.
It's really the perfect cover for a tank, though, isn't it? Because
Totally.
the fan base loves him. So they can trot him out there and they can struggle, which they will. I agree with you. I think it's all part of their plan to get Lawrence. I think they've identified him and make sure they're bad enough. And they can trot out Minshew. The fans love his jean shorts and all that stuff and the beards. And it's a perfect cover for a tank.
I guess that's true. And honestly, good for them for getting a pick out of Nick Foles, recognizing that, like, okay, this guy is not going to be our franchise quarterback, so we might as well get something for him now. So I guess fair play to them for that.
All right, I have one more question as we look through some of these numbers. Teams 20, 21, and 22 are all interesting to me, and I'll start with 20, which is the Chargers, 7.7 wins. 21, the Bears, 8 wins. We'll start with those two. How much higher up this list would these two teams be if they were smart about this and brought in Cam Newton?
I think they would both be higher. I'm 100% with you. I am 1,000% with you. I do not understand the reluctance to take a flyer on a guy like Cam Newton at this point, who has had proven success in this league. With what the Bears are trotting out, I mean, at least with the Chargers, you have the upside of
they drafted Herbert. I get that, right?
With the Bears, it's almost more egregious because you're wasting this defense. Right, like that is like, I just don't. It's sort of mind-boggling in that way. How high? I'm not sure. Would they both be higher? Absolutely. I don't really think there's any question about that. They absolutely would be higher if they did that. So if the name of the game is winning, I don't quite understand why he's still on the market.
The Bears one, to me, is just the most stunning. I mean, the Chargers are saying, look, Tyrod, he was good in that role with Baker Mayfield. We're going to put him in that same role with Justin Herbert. That at least from a logic standpoint, I can get my head around that. The Bears to trade an asset and take on Nick Foles' salary while treading water with Mitch Trubisky when you have a defense that feels like it's ready to make a run with a quarterback who's proven that with that kind of a defense and that kind of a team, he can be very, very good, is a stunning one to me. On your list, though, 22, Arizona Cardinals. A lot of places have the Arizona Cardinals being what the Browns were going into last year, which is that team that everybody thinks is going to blow up, that everybody thinks is, Kyler Murray for MVP, and they're going all the way. And we heard all that. Baker for MVP. The Browns are going to win the division finally. And the Browns finished, right around 22, right around this actual spot in the league. And now that's where you have the Cardinals. Is that one that you guys have gotten a lot of gruff from fired up people down there in the Valley of the Sun, or are they just realizing that they live in paradise and who cares about complaining what some 20,000 simulations say about the Arizona Cardinals?
I haven't heard a lot from Cardinals fans, so they must just
that's
be
why.
they must be just enjoying the weather. I think it's interesting. I agree with you that Arizona has upside that maybe isn't represented by what we would say, they're mean. And I think that Cleveland is still that team, to be honest with you. I've been thinking about Cleveland a lot, and I'm sure you guys talk about this all the time. That roster is still absolutely loaded. And if Baker Mayfield breaks right, the whole season could break really right for Cleveland. And so that's a team that I stare at and I think, wow, I could really see them going far this year. Now, who would I move them up again on this list ahead of? I would put them ahead of Atlanta. I would put them ahead of Denver. I would have to think hard beyond that. But, yeah, there's upside, I think, for both of those teams this year. And, there's definitely parallels there, both not just because of the Oklahoma quarterbacks, but the whole situation.
Yeah, both huge receivers acquired in those off seasons as well. A lot of parallels there. It does seem, and Seth, just to follow up on that, I know you got to run, but just to follow up on that, it does, from our vantage point. Again, we're very comfortable with it because we had a last off season where so much came so quick that was maybe undeserved. Now it does seem like there's been a kind of an overreaction to what happened here, and we lived through it, so we saw a lot of it firsthand. And I think that overcorrection has, to your point, I think it's real.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about. I'm starting to have conviction on is this Cleveland team, and you're not even asking for a quarterback who's never shown it before, to show it, right? Like we've seen some of that Mayfield upside, and I just can't now look at that roster and think about Odell Beckham, think about the rebuilt offensive line, and think about the secondary and the pass rush. I think you even have like sneaky additions like Adrian Claiborne. I think could rack up some sneaky sacks for Cleveland. I like that roster a heck of a lot, and I think there's a chance that like come November we're like, how the heck did we not see this coming? Of course they were going to be good.
Seth, this was great, man. Thanks for your time.
No problem, and I promise you, I wasn't just blowing brown smoke just because I'm on a Cleveland show. Promise.
Well, this is science. This is 20,000 simulations.
Science, yeah.
There's no bias here. There's no bias. It's science. The facts.
Appreciate you, Seth.
See you guys.